You knew to shut up and enjoy the view. Most eggheads want to talk it away.
I know I say this all the time, but I really wish Gene Hackman was my dad. Folks, today is a sad day in Hollywood and all over the world for movie lovers or anybody that celebrates people coming together to make cinema. The recent news of Gene Hackman and his wife and pet dog passing is incredibly hard for some of us who really love his work, and it's an impact that is most definitely gonna be felt throughout cinema. So for today's episode, I thought we could honor Gene Hackman by taking a look at one of his most iconic roles in one of his best movies, Crimson Tide. So join us at JoBlo today as we honor Gene Hackman in the best way we know how, by watching his movies. Rest in peace to yet another Hollywood legend, and let's get into the video.
Several years ago, Ethan Hawke said something really interesting in an interview with Marc Maron. He admitted to having a lot of anxiety when he was cast in Training Day, because he said that whenever he watched movies with Denzel Washington, he felt like his co-stars were blown out of the water by him. One exception that Hawke mentioned, however, is Gene Hackman, with him saying that the two played brilliantly off each other in Tony Scott's Crimson Tide, partly due to the fact that they were playing adversaries. Indeed, such was the power of Gene Hackman, who tragically passed away recently. While his career is loaded with classics, including The French Connection, The Conversation, The Royal Tenenbaums, and so many more, one of his biggest box office hits ever was Crimson Tide, a movie that's long overdue for a deep dive here at JoBlo. Now, when asked why he wanted to do Crimson Tide, Denzel Washington said it was because he wanted to be in there jousting with a master, referring to Gene Hackman. Indeed, Washington is probably the only living actor who one could compare to Hackman. If one were to remake Crimson Tide nowadays, it would be a no-brainer to cast him in the Hackman role and then put a young up-and-comer in the Denzel role. But who could hold the screen like he did back in 1995?
I'm the commander of this fucking ship! Give me that goddamn key!
The story for Crimson Tide is one that has even more of a kick in 2025 than it did 30 years ago. It revolves around the crew of a nuclear submarine being deployed among instability in Russia. Gene Hackman plays Frank Ramsey, the soon-to-be retired captain of the USS Alabama, with Denzel as Lieutenant Commander Ron Hunter, his executive officer. The movie revolves around the ship being ordered to launch their nuclear missiles, with conflict arising between the captain and his XO when a second message is cut off before they can receive it. Ramsey believes the orders were being confirmed, while Hunter believes they're being told to stand down. With literally the fate of the world at hand, the two men go to war, with Ramsey's loyal officers committed to putting down an attempted mutiny, while Hunter and his men believe they are preventing nuclear war from accidentally breaking out.
Mr. Hunter has the comm.
The movie has a lot of sympathy for both men, and it couldn't have been cast any better, with Hackman and Washington having a brilliantly adversarial relationship, albeit one tinged with mutual respect and perhaps a tiny bit of racial animosity, which gives the film some much commented upon and juicy racial subtext.
And at birth, they're not white. They're black.
Indeed, there's something so juicy about the way that Hackman and Washington go mano a mano, with both absolutely bringing out the best in each other. The film is directed by the late Tony Scott, and it kicked off a long series of collaborations between him and Washington, with Denzel always crediting him as one of his favorite directors. At the time, Scott was coming off of True Romance, a movie which was, at the time, critically reviled and a box office flop, even if it later became a huge cult classic, which is deservedly called one of his greatest films. It was produced by Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, the two biggest producers of the 80s, whose careers, along with Scott's, had largely imploded on the set of the Tom Cruise movie Days of Thunder, where tales of behind-the-scenes debauchery became legendary. Crimson Tide put all involved back on top, with it being a juicy mix of a Hunt for Red October-style techno-thriller mixed in with the heavy-duty acting fireworks you'd find in a legal thriller, making this play out like it's a non-stop action film, despite the fact that very little physical conflict actually occurs in the film. While Washington and Hackman are incredible, the movie also benefits from a terrific script which is credited to Michael Schiffer, who would later work on the Call of Duty video games, but also had rewrites by the three best script doctors in town, Steven Zaillian, Robert Towne, and perhaps infamously, Quentin Tarantino.
Millions of lives at stake here, Peter. Don't make a dumb decision.
Why do I say infamously? Well, if you watch the movie, it's very obvious where the Tarantino dialogue comes in, with an on-screen argument over who is the better illustrator of Silver Surfer and other pop culture references having his distinct stamp on them.
Well, I said that the Kirby Silver Surfer was the only real Silver Surfer, and that the Mobius Silver Surfer was shit.
Tarantino, of course, knew Tony Scott from True Romance, but when he was on set, he was infamously cornered by Denzel Washington, who loudly chastised him in front of everybody for his use of racial slurs in his scripts. In the years since, Washington has expressed a lot of regret for the incident and says that him and Tarantino have since buried the hatchet, with Denzel's daughter, Katia, actually working as a PA on the set of Django Unchained.
That's who the hell you calling Snowball, horse boy?
The supporting cast in the film is similarly choice, with Viggo Mortensen playing a young officer whose loyalties are divided, while George Dzundza has a superb part as the ship's ranking non-com, whose conscience forces him to be disloyal to his captain. Plus, there's a young James Gandolfini as the most diehard of Hackman's loyal officers, while Ricky Schroeder, Steve Zahn, and even the great Jason Robards in an unbilled cameo at the end of the movie all show up. Tie it all up with a score by Hans Zimmer, and man, you've got the recipe for a classic thriller. The movie was deservedly a blockbuster in the summer of 1995, and it proved to be a major boost for Washington, with him having finally headlined a big-budget action movie of his own, and 30 years later, he's still one of the most bankable leading men in the business. As for Hackman, it was just another in a long series of blockbuster films he had roles in, but his performance is widely regarded as a highlight in his late career. The movie remained a favorite of director Tony Scott until he died, with him rarely photographed without sporting the red USS Alabama hat that Hackman wears in the movie. Of course, watching Crimson Tide now is very bittersweet, with Scott, Gandolfini, Robards, and now Hackman all gone. If you haven't seen it in a while, give it a watch and see all these legends performing at the very top of their game.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.